Good evening, friends. Today we are going to discuss how the concept of poverty has evolved over the period, over the history, that is, in the last around almost 2000 years. Right. So, how it has evolved from being defined as a natural phenomenon, as a divine phenomenon, to a phenomena that is artificially created by a group of man over the another group of person. Just a second. So today we are going to discuss the concept of poverty and its evolution over the historical period. So first we'll see that the first that how it has evolved, and in the first, if you see, then what we have to say that the word English word poverty is derived from the Latin pauper, meaning poor. Now, as far as this poor and poverty is concerned, the concern is not new. It has been a major human preoccupation for many centuries. But the approach towards this poverty has been different in different historical period. We can divide the historical period into two major periods. That is, the first period is pre-modern period, and if we say pre-modern period, means prior to 18th century, used mainly in Europe, because in modern period, in modern times, whenever we are dealing with certain social issues or social problem, basically it is dealt in reference to the Western history or Western European history. So pre-modern period and then modern period, these are the two major historical period in which we can discuss the concept of poverty. Now, as we know that poverty has two concepts, right now poverty has two concepts. One is called as absolute poverty, and another is called as relative poverty, right? Absolute poverty is linked with absolute material deprivation. That is, whether our needs or material needs are getting fulfilled or not, right? Now we all know that human history 97% of the period we have been into hunting and gathering stage, and hunting and gathering stage, the economy is of subsistence nature. That means that in hunting and gathering stage, as per today's standard, all people, all members of the society faced the problem of poverty, because each and every person had to deal with the issue of the next meal, and that's why everybody was poor. But at that time, poverty or poor poverty was not any way a phenomena that was a matter of concern for the people, right? But as we moved onwards, as technology developed, as technological growth took place in the societies, efficiency of production increased. Gradually, what we found that a few people or a section of the societies, they enjoyed all the luxury of the life, whereas masses mainly spent a subsistence status in the society, right? So what we are saying, post hunting and gathering stage, we also call it tribal stage or tribalism, and till modernization began, this was a period when a few people enjoyed all the luxuries of life, whereas masses struggled for subsistence, struggled for subsistence, right? So this was a period where we find that a small section of the society enjoyed better access to the material resources of the society, whereas masses remained in abject poverty, or they did not have proper access to the material resources of the society. That means majority of the population of any society lived a life of below poverty line from today's standard. As far as you see today's standard of living, the way we define BPL, majority of the people, they struggled for a square meal, they faced day-to-day challenges of food, nutrition, etc., and therefore they all were into a condition of poverty. But at this point of time, poverty was defined as a natural phenomenon or a divine phenomenon, right? So what we are saying, in that period, that is post tribal to pre-modern, poverty was defined as a natural phenomenon, an outcome of or consequence of divine decree. Simply said, it was described as divine phenomenon, right? Now, whenever you describe something as divine phenomenon or natural phenomenon, inherent in this description is the idea that human being cannot do anything. It all depends on the divine dispensation. It all depends on how divine ordains an individual person, right? That means whether a person is born into a rich family or in a poor family, It is due to divine ordination. It is due to divine decree. And basically, birth in a poor family was described as an outcome of past sins or the sins that was done in the previous birth. So what we say, the treatment in prior to Marx, poverty was treated as a natural phenomenon and was considered a product of divine decree. God was seen as creating and ordaining the status of individual, right? And this is what is you see in the Victorian hymn, all things bright and beautiful, the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate, right? So what we are trying to say, that in a way people, human group, human society was into a fatalistic mode where they had this idea that they cannot do anything as far as the economic or material crisis in the society is concerned. And that's why they defined it as a natural phenomenon or a divine phenomenon. But the scene changed after the arrival of Karl Marx, right? Prior to Marx, poverty was defined as natural or divine phenomenon. But Marx changed the description of poverty from being a natural phenomenon to an artificial phenomenon. Artificial phenomena means what? When we say artificial phenomenon, that means it is man-made, masses are in poor conditions because they are exploited by a small section of society. A small section of society, right? And the way Marx described about the poverty and its cause, it was identified as a social problem. So what is the major contribution of Marxian theory is that poverty was identified as a social problem. Poverty was described as an artificial or man-made phenomenon, right? It is because of the exploitative social order, right? But along with this description, there was a positive aspect of this, and the positive facet was, since it is man-made, so it can be eradicated by human being. Since it is man-made, it can be eradicated by humans. And for this, what he suggested, that the working class should unite. The working class should unite and they should collectively wage a revolution against the propertied class so that the concept of private property is removed and an equitable distribution of material resources is achieved in the society, right? So you can see here, I'm just reading, in the same way poverty and misfortune in general have often been seen as divinely ordained as punishment of sin for sin, and again the situation was defined as immutable and unchangeable. But Marxian theory changed the course of thought about poverty from being divine to artificial. According to Marx, poverty in industrial society is no longer a natural phenomenon, an affliction of nature or of providence, but was the result of human ignorance and exploitation. This way, through poverty was defined as a social problem, but the positive aspect of the thought was that it was considered as eradicable. Right? Now, definitely, when you want to eradicate, definitely you have to approach scientifically. You have to describe about the cause of the phenomenon and what are the measures that has to be taken to eradicate the issue. Now, all of us know that Marx was the most prominent mobilizer of 20th century, right? Starting from Bolshevik Revolution to Chinese Revolution and other socialist revolution, Marxist ideology had been a central axis around which the working class has mobilized themselves, leading to various working class movement, and this had put pressure on the industrial class, the capitalist class, the ruling dispensation to take some measures so that the rebelliousness of these people could be contained. Right? So what is we are seeing here? Pressure of Marxian activism and evolution of a democratic and welfare state pursued the social thinkers and political class to address this problem. A careful analysis of Marxian prediction of phenomena of poverty points it towards being a relative phenomenon. So what Marx is saying that in primitive period all people were poor, but that is not a problem in society if all people are poor. The problem is when the society has developed its resources, but these resources are asymmetrically appropriated by a small section of the society at the cost of the masses, and therefore increasing the gap between the haves and have-nots. Let me write it. For Marx, absolute material deprivation is not an issue at all, as in primitive period all the standard of living of all members of society was low but equal, and therefore it was not a problem. When did it start taking shape of a problem, social problem? When a few people started enjoying the benefit of development at the cost of the rest. The issue became a problem only when material resources of society started growing but started growing, but were asymmetrically appropriated by a small or very small section of the society at the cost of deprivation of masses, right? And this asymmetric appropriation, what did it do? It created income gap between people. And as society started growing materially or economically, the gap is continuously and progressively increasing, right? So from this period onwards, the concept of relative poverty became the major issue of concern. The concept of relative poverty became the major issue of concern. Now here you see a situation. Situation was that on the one hand, there were propertied class, right? And on the other hand, there were working class. Working class was mobilizing around Marxist ideology, to challenge the domination of or misappropriation of elites or economic elites. Definitely, this working class mobilization was challenging the position of the dominant class, that is the propertied class. And therefore, propertied class would definitely act to retaliate and contain this challenge. Right? Now, naturally, in such a situation, what will happen? That propertied class would weigh what kind of measure is going to contain the rebelliousness of the working class or the poor class, right? Naturally, if masses rise, force cannot be applied. Propertied class and ruling dispensation can never have enough force to contain the working class challenge only through force. Instead, what they will do, they will try to manipulate the situation, right? So, in order to contain the rebelliousness of the working class, what capitalist class did, they tried to nullify the idea of relative poverty and project the idea of absolute poverty as a major issue of debate, right? So challenged by the rebelliousness of the working class, dominant class tried to address this problem, first to contain it and second to preserve their own domination. So what did they do? To contain this, they treated poverty as a condition of absolute material deprivation rather than income inequality or income gap, right? And their major focus was providing material aid or income aid to poor people, to poor people, right? See, I'm again repeating it. Challenged by the rebelliousness of the working class and their collective power, it was difficult by the ruling class to contain the rebelliousness by force alone. So they tried to shift the axis of debate from relative poverty to absolute poverty, that is, poverty being defined as an condition of absolute material condition rather than an issue of income inequality, right? So what happened because of that? The issue of poverty was isolated from the larger social context and was being reduced to merely a case of material deprivation and subsistence. So here you will see that poverty was treated as an individual phenomenon. Poverty was treated as a condition of absolute material deprivation, right? And the idea of relative poverty was completely subdued so that the asymmetric appropriation of the resources of the society does not become an issue, right? And the poor people remain content with elevation of their standard of living, right? So in last 100 years, if you see a few centuries, then the concept of poverty, mainly in reference to absolute material deprivation, has evolved. According to Peter Townsend, three alternative conceptions of poverty has evolved in the last century, which has become a basis for international and comparative work. These are subsistence, basic needs, and relative deprivation. You can see that subsistence, it existed till 1970s. From 1970s, basic need concept came into existence, and in 21st century, the idea of relative deprivation is gaining predominance or preeminence as far as the analysis of the concept of poverty is concerned. Now see how this idea of poverty as a subsistence phenomenon had emerged. Basically, it emerged in Victorian England. Victorian England means the period between 1837 to 1902, right? This was the period when Queen Victoria was the queen, right? Or was at the helm of affairs. Helm of affairs in England, right? So this is the period, and in this period, nutritionist gave certain definition of people who were below the poverty line, right? So the subsistence idea was a result of work prompted by nutritionists in Victorian England. Nutritionists, definitely those who explain the nutritional requirement of a human being for survival, right? Basically, what you will see in this nutritionist explanation, the major concern is reproduction of labor power to make people ready to work tomorrow in the factories. So if a person is spending some energy today in the factory, naturally these energy needs to be replenished, right? If the spent energy is not replenished, naturally the person would not be able to work with the same enthusiasm and energy tomorrow, and therefore it will be definitely hampering the interest of the capitalist, because according to Marx, capitalists gain profit only when the workers work. So if workers' energy gets reduced, definitely their efficiency would be less, and therefore the output would not be same, and therefore the profit would go down, right? So basically you can say that this is a kind of design from the capitalist to engage nutritionists to define poverty in certain way, right? So what these nutritionists do, they define poverty. Families were defined to be in poverty when their incomes were not sufficient to obtain minimum necessaries for the maintenance of merely physical efficiency, right? A family was treated as being in poverty if its income minus rent fell short of the poverty line. Though allowances were given for clothing, fuel, and some other items, but these allowances were very less. That means the major portion of income was to be spent in consumption of the commodities that were necessary for replenishment of the energy that was spent in the last day work, and this was mainly with a purpose to maintain the physical efficiency of the labor. This idea, that is subsistence idea of poverty, has influenced the practice of international and national policies for over 100 years, right? But there is a certain problem with this particular definition of poverty. This again we can explain from the Marxian perspective. What does subsistence idea do? Subsistence idea of poverty, right? It reduces human being to the level of animals, right? To the level of animals. That means it does not treat any difference between animals and human being. Marx had argued, if you see Marx said eating, sleeping, and procreating is an animal function. Right? Human being differs from other animals as it has purpose other than eating, sleeping, and procreating. Right? So one thing that we see, the difference between humans and animals is that human beings are characterized by some purpose, which he called as creativity or creative autonomy. That human being wants to create something. So definitely, to fulfill the creative instinct of human being, they would require what? They would require some other thing, right? That must be fulfilled. And secondly, it said human beings are not only consumer but also producer of commodities, of goods. Now definitely, since they are producer, this brings them into social relationship with other people. Social relationship with other people. That means a member of a society has certain rights and obligation towards the other members of the society too, that must be fulfilled. Right? So, if you treat human need merely by subsistence criteria, then you can clearly come to the conclusion that human beings would remain dissatisfied throughout their life, and that's what Marx had called it as alienation. Right? In short, what we are saying, that human beings are not merely a biological organism. Human beings are social organism. As a social organism, they have certain needs, right? They need to maintain the social network. They need to maintain their cultural identity. And therefore, these needs must also be fulfilled to let them feel human. Right? That's why this particular concept of subsistence, poverty, gradually it lost its popularity in the society, and a new description of poverty started emerging. Before explaining that, just let me first read these sentences. The inherent limitation of the idea of subsistence defining poverty line surfaced in the second half of the 20th century. The use of subsistence to define poverty was criticized because it implies that human needs are mainly physical rather than also social needs. People are not simply individual organisms requiring replacement of sources of physical energy. They are also social beings expected to perform socially demanding roles as workers, citizens, parents, partners, neighbors, and friends. They are not simply consumer of physical goods, but producer of those goods, and are also expected to act out different roles in their various social associations. They are dependent on collectively provided utilities and facilities, these needs apply universally and not merely in the rich industrial societies. So, this concept had many limitations. The most important limitation was it treated human being merely as a biological organism, which cannot be taken for granted, and therefore there emerged a need to change the idea of the concept of poverty, right? Before going further for the second criteria that emerged in 1970s, that is the concept of basic need, we'll go for what Unacademy has to offer from 17th November or 10th to 17th November. You can see. So you can think about this as a commercial break in this session. As Unacademy is saying, there is a special price week, right? Reduced by 10% only on combo and iconic GS, right? You can see here iconic combo whose price was 78,999 is now 63,989. That means you can save 15,010 rupees. Similarly, on iconic GS also you are going to save around 14,155, and plus combo you are going to save 10,965. This is for 1 year. When you go for 2-year subscription, on plus combo you save 15,632, iconic combo 22,849, and iconic GS 21,992. For 3 years, plus combo 18,897, and monthly subscription charges are considerably reduced if you go for 3 years. Iconic combo, you save 30,129 rupees, and iconic GS you are saving 29,212. Let me tell you here that civil services preparation is not a preparation of short period. Rather, it takes a longer period to prepare. In my 2.5 decades of experience of teaching, I have found that only a minority of the people they qualify civil services in their first attempt, right? You can say that the overall people who qualify in their first attempt is not more than 10%. Majority of the people they qualify in second attempt and third attempt, and again fourth, fifth, sixth attempt the success ratio goes down. That means you need at least 2 to 3 years to remain in touch with the classes, to remain in touch with the mentors, go on practicing the test series. Therefore, it would be prudent to go for 3-year subscription or at least 2-year subscription, so that with minimum expenses you could do maximum preparation. Because as you go for longer duration subscription, the monthly subscription charges goes down considerably, right? If you keep on renewing it after every 6 months, definitely it will be quite expensive, but you are the best judge of yourself. What was my experience? I have said you need to follow your instinct and then subscribe for the programs. We have exceptional result in 2020, as we see that there are 7 learners of Unacademy. They have achieved rank between 1 to 20, 20 between 21 and 100, and overall 143 learners have achieved these ranks. You can see some of the names that are there with their rank. Now, as I have said earlier, what do you need to crack UPSC CSE exam? Guidance from top educator is required. Comprehensive test series is required. Competition is very fierce, so practice is very important. High quality reading material is required. Doubt clearing session is required. Answer writing practice is required. And comprehensive coverage of current affairs is also required. Unacademy is a single platform that is providing solution of all these needs. For example, structured GS and optional courses by India's top educators in Hindi and English, 100 plus unique test series including full length tests and sectional tests, 20 plus high quality notebooks to cover entire UPSC CSE syllabus, dedicated doubt clearing and answer writing courses. Definitely this comes with the iconic subscription, and current affairs simplified course plus articulate magazine. Batches for 2022 is starting from 17th November. You can see here that Mission 22 comprehensive batch course on GS for UPSC CSE in Hindi मीडियम ऑल्सो संपूर्ण सामान्य अध्ययन की समग्र तैयारी करें, लक्ष्य है 2022. Expedition 2022, a comprehensive batch course for GS for UPSC CSE. You can see the teachers, prominent teachers who are teaching here, right? Similarly, we have 2 years course also, Mission 2-year batch for GS and UPSC, both in Hindi and English medium. Now you see here Learner's Journey 2022 batch, 7 months plus 2 months plus 3 months. A properly structured program is there, which is starting on 17th November. From 17th November 21 to 31st March 22, we have prelims plus mains comprehensive courses for rock solid foundation. From 1st April 22 to 31st May 22, complete dedication to the prelims preparation, where we'll have PT 365 courses for quick revision and practice. 5th June 22, UPSC prelims, that is the exam. 10th June 22 to 10th September 22, we have this Mission AIR 1 batch for mains 2022. And on 16th September, you have UPSC main exam. So one who is planning for this 2022 mains, it is ideal for them to go for this, those who have still not started the preparation. And these are the faculties you can see who will be teaching in English, bilingual and Hindi, right? Then we have 2 years program here, 17th November to 4th January. Courses will start from basic, where NCERT would be the focus. So beginner to advanced level backgrounder and wisdom nugget classes. From 12th January 22 to 31st October 22, a comprehensive prelims plus mains program. 15 November 22 to 31st December, mains special course, Super 500 mains series, model questions plus previous year's questions. Then we have 15th January to 15th April, prelims crash course would be there. That is in 23. 15th April 23 to 10th May 23, current affairs roundup with multiple educators plus MCQ multiple choice questions. UPSC pre, that is 23, that is May or June, it will be there. And 15th June to 31st August, main crash course would be there. And September will have 23 mains, right? So all batches are starting from 17th November. You can see this. Free test series for UPSC CSE, right? So these are the Monday to Friday test, morning 10 a.m. T20 daily current affairs test series, November, Monday to Friday 7:30 p.m. Unacademy Combat every Sunday 11 a.m. You can enroll now, and for enrollment you can use access code NICEIS. Just use the access code NICEIS, right, to join this. So for all this, use code NISIS you can use to access these, right? So this is all about the current offers and programs that is given by Unacademy for the learners. So all those who are planning to join, they must hurry up and join the required courses as per their need and instinct. Now we come back to our main lecture, and that is concept of poverty. This subsistence need description of poverty is changed from the basic need concept. Basic need concept, right? As we said, there are two important aspects of this. One is physical or material goods, right? But mind it, society changes fast. Culture changes fast. And as the technical status, economic status, and the culture of a society changes, people's primary need or basic need also changes. In short, even this material need is not a static concept, rather it is a dynamic concept. We are talking about basic need concept. In this basic need concept, we have two components. One is material needs and second is social needs, right? In social need, we can say collective material need, and second is the cultural need. For example, if in a society, birthday celebration is the cultural need, and if a family is not able to celebrate the birthday of its child, that family is unable to fulfill his social need, and therefore that family, even if nutritional support is sufficient, should be described as falling below the poverty line. This is the concept, basic need concept. Now, when we say material need, the material need is also not a static concept. For example, if you see in contemporary world, connectivity is a primary need. It's a basic need. If a family, if an individual doesn't have a smartphone, a good internet connectivity, then he would be definitely remain deprived in the many aspects of the society as far as the individual development is concerned. Now, this connectivity, internet connectivity or mobile, was not an essential need or necessity 3 decades ago or 4 decades ago. But today it is essential. So if a family is not having access to mobile connectivity, data network proper, definitely he will be deprived from many resources of the society. He would have reduced opportunity. He will remain excluded from the mainstream society. And therefore, there would be little scope for economic advancement of these people and social advancement of these people. What we want to say, that the concept of material need is not limited to the idea of nutrition. Rather, the material need has to go beyond the nutritional need. So this material need is nutritional need plus emerging needs. Plus emerging needs. So what was the need in 1980? If that is being fulfilled, that would not satisfy today's people. So from time to time, we have to evaluate the basic need of the people. That is the most important aspect of basic need concepts, right? So physical needs are subject to rapid change because of shifts in social activity and demand patterns. The need for material goods, their relevance to the society of the day, and even the goods themselves are not, after all, fixed or unvarying. And the amount and kind, and thus the cost or food depend on work, climate, and social costs. So material needs turn out to be socially determined in different ways. That's why this basic need came into concept, and it has got a great support from international labor organization. Two elements were included: minimum consumption needs of a family, adequate food, shelter and clothing, as well as certain household furniture and equipment. And second need was essential services provided by and for the community at large, such as safe water, sanitation, public transport, healthcare, education, and other cultural facilities. As I said about that celebration of birthday. In rural areas, basic needs also include land, agricultural tools, and access to farming. If you see an abstract shift from the subsistence description to basic need idea, is that the concept of poverty is not being now isolated from the social context. Rather, poverty has to be evaluated in the context of the social setup. Right? No doubt, basic need is an extension of subsistence concept, but it is not subsistence concept. Right? This paved the way for community development approach. Right? That means eradication of poverty or poverty alleviation cannot be successfully attained when we have an isolationist approach, individualistic approach. Instead, what we should do, we should try to see the cause of the poverty rooted in the context of the society, and therefore the whole society, its structure, community, and its identity must be in consideration to deal with the problem of poverty. And therefore, government must have a community development approach. India, from 1952 onwards, we have community development program. Now, the third concept that has come, which is very contemporary, and that is relative deprivation. What it is saying, the two important differences has to be considered. First, time difference. And second, intersocietal difference. Intersocietal difference. That means today the standard of poverty, the way it has to be defined, it cannot be compared with how it was defined in 20th century, right? So what it is saying that you have to define the concept of poverty rooted not only the societal context but the historical context also, right? So this is the latest definition, but ultimately there is a lot of difficulty in this relative deprivation concept. So finally what the national and international organizations have done, they have reduced the issue of poverty to the income consumption criteria, right? That is, family belonging, having earning up to certain amount, they are described as falling below the poverty line. Now what are the criteria of determining poverty in India? Till 9th plan, we had merely this income criteria that every household income, if it is less than 20,000 rupees, they were said to be falling in below poverty line. But from 10th plan onwards, the criteria changed, and there were 13 parameters in the rural area and 7 parameters in the urban area that was laid down, right, based on which the poverty was calculated. For example, rural parameters, you can see there, these are the parameters, one more parameter is there. So 13 parameters are there. Each parameter is evaluated on the score of 0 to 4, right? That means 13 into 4, that is overall score is 52. If a family scores less than 15, it is said to belong to BPL, that is below poverty line. Similarly, in urban area there are 7 criterias, and based on that, here also 0 to 4, and if family, a particular family is scoring less than certain marks, then it is said to be falling below the poverty line, right? So in conclusion, what we say, right? First, you can say tribal stage, right? Standard of living was low but equal, so poverty was not an issue, right? Then we came from tribal stage to feudal stage. Poverty was an issue, but considered natural and divine phenomenon, right? Third stage came modern, and modern stage Marx. Poverty was defined as an artificial, man-made, and outcome of exploitation, right? And he emphasized on the idea of relative poverty. Relative poverty does not deal with the absolute material deprivation, does not deal with absolute material deprivation, but emphasizes on or focuses on widening income gap, right? Because Marx had said that from tribal stage till capitalism, the standard of living of the working class has continuously improved, right? But that is not the issue. The issue is that whatever the total material development of society is taking place, a small section of the society is misappropriating or asymmetrically appropriating those resources. But fourth, what we said, there was an successful attempt to project poverty as material need, right? And this also has three stages. If you see that last 100 years, three stages. First is subsistence idea of poverty, then basic need. Basic need considers that other than material need, there are certain social needs. And the third is relative deprivation. That is, the whole idea of the concept of poverty is a dynamic issue. So a single criteria or a single historical basis cannot be a proper measure to evaluate and deal with the issue of poverty, right? So this is what I wanted to say about this. I hope you must have liked, right? Let me tell you about myself. You must be knowing Praveen Kishore. I am teaching sociology. That is, I am sociology educator on Unacademy. I am director of NICE IS also, right? And if you like my lecture, if you want to attend my classes, you can join UPS Unacademy. While joining, do use the referral code NICE IS to attain 10% discount on subscription charges. Thank you. Good night.